Well, it's our great privilege and honor to have Pastor Bobby with us today. He's going to be, yeah, he's one of the pastors of Life Church, one of the largest churches in the U.S. You might know he's also the founder of YouVersion Bible app, an app that you might already have on your phones. So it's such a treat to have him with us today. Would you give him a warm welcome as he come up to speak to us?
Good evening. How are you all? It is a pleasure to be here with you. I have heard a lot about this church from our friends in the UK, and it's such an honor to be able to be here with you tonight. I came into this region. We flew into Singapore last Saturday, and I've been in Singapore and then in Jakarta. And then here in Kuala Lumpur the last few days, I had different conferences and events and meetings and things. And I have to tell you that this is the last thing that I'm doing before I fly home tomorrow morning. And I've been looking forward to this moment, not because it's the last, but because I've been looking forward to this moment all week long and being with you guys. It's really something I've been looking forward to. And I had very high expectations from everything I've heard, and you guys have exceeded my expectations already. So thank you for the honor and the opportunity to be here. Now, if I can be really vulnerable and transparent with you, I do conferences quite a bit, and I tell the story about what God's done, primarily the story about what He's done through YouVersion and the Bible app. And so I get invited to speak at conferences, and I do that, and that's something I'm honored to do and be able to do. And I have lots of interesting people that we get to meet and connect with, and so I do that quite a bit as well. But when I had an opportunity to come here to Kuala Lumpur for a conference, I had two different churches actually reach out to me and ask if I could speak at their church on Sunday. This was one, and there's another church this morning. And so I had the opportunity today, or an invitation to speak at 4 services today. So 3 this morning and then this one. Now, that might seem like a normal thing that I do, but this is the vulnerable part. I actually don't ever preach in churches. I really don't. And partly because, I know you guys even laugh at that, but the reason is I actually am a bit intimidated by preaching. I don't see myself as a preacher. I don't have the preacher charisma, kind of style to what I preach. I do talks at conferences. It's like a different kind of thing. And so usually I find a way to turn those opportunities down to speak at churches. But what I've found in my life is that sometimes when God puts me in situations where I feel less capable, where I feel like I'm not enough, and I don't feel like that I'm capable of doing it, those are the situations that God works the most in when I step in faith into Him. And so I did 3 messages this morning. I'll do this one now, and that is something completely new for me. And the reason I'm doing it is in trust. I'm just stepping in and believing that God has something for you today through this time, because I don't feel adequate to do it on my own. And so that's just a really is that a good way to start a message? Well, that's very encouraging. It's the truth, but it's also been something that's been evident throughout my life. And so what I want to do today is just kind of share my story, if that's okay with you. This will be my style. This will be the way that I communicate. It may not sound like a preacher, but I promise you, I believe that God could work through it still. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. Is that all right? And so you get to hear maybe more than you want to hear, but we'll go there. So this concept of not feeling like I'm enough or not feeling like I'm capable of doing it started a long time ago. And the very first time I became a follower of Jesus when I was 14 years old. And when that happened in my life, it was a radical transformation. I mean, it was like I was a completely different person when I showed back up to school. And I had this desire and passion to share about what Jesus had done in my life with my friends. And so I was trying to figure out how to do that. And all of my friends loved rap music. And I actually felt like God was telling me that I should try to use rap music to share Jesus with my friends. Now, there was only a couple problems. I had never rapped before. I didn't know how to rap. And I'm sure that there was someone else that would be better at rapping than I would be. But see, what I realized, it wasn't about what I could do. It was just really about what God could do, through me. So in faith, I stepped into that, and I became a Christian rapper for 5 years. I was a rapper for 5 years. And so, well, I don't know. I have no idea if this picture made it or not, but I showed a picture earlier to try to prove. Is there a picture? I don't know if there's not one. Okay. If you go to my Instagram account, it's Bobby Gwald, BOBBYGWALD. It's like an abbreviation of my last name. Oh, it's on there. Okay, Bobby Gwald. You can go there on my Instagram account. Go back through like a month or two, and I posted a picture of me as a rapper back in the day. I had braids in my hair, and it's a completely, you'll never believe it if you don't go right now, but you can check it out later if you want. Instead what I'll do to prove that I was a rapper to you is I'll rap for you tonight. How about that? Just something special for you. I'll come out of retirement today. I'll go back into retirement after this. It's been 20-something years since I've been a Christian rapper, and now there's camera phones already popping out. There were no camera phones back when I was a rapper, so I have there's no history of this that exists online, but there apparently will be now. Well, just make sure you tag @Bobby Gwald if you're going to post that picture, if we're going to do cameras. So you got to give me just a second to kind of get into a rap mode. Is it okay, Pastor, is it okay if I rap here? That's not going to be too, you guys are cool with rapping in church? Great, all right. That's good. All right. There's a lot more camera phones now. Every time I look down and look back up, it changes. Hold on. I about lost my voice with that worship. I just keep, it's 4 worship sets today, 4 speaking. Hang on one second. Now, just one quick caveat. So, no like clapping to the beat, because that will totally mess me up, because I have my own rhythm, and I don't want you to, all right, there we go. All right, here we go. Well, are you ready? All right. Well, I'm on a mission across the ocean, just letting the world around me see my devotion to Christ. You see, it's not what I say, but it's how I walk and live my life every day. Because I'm on a mission and my field's right here, styling the truth to your ear. So don't just hear all the words, but listen to my heart. Because we've got to start showing the whole world the love of Jesus Christ by each and every day, living His love in our life. So many people are searching for the truth, but they never find it because we hide it inside of us. It's time to let your light shine out, because it's the love of Jesus Christ that it's all about. So now if you've gone dim, it's time to get bright, because whoever finds God in you finds life. Back into retirement now. So I'm going to get this water undone here. Sorry. I noticed that in Malaysia, the water bottles are completely full, like to the very, very tip of the top. Every time I open it, water always comes out. Sorry about that. So, 5 years, I did Christian rap. And again, I didn't know how to rap. I had never rapped before, but I felt like God was asking me to do it. And when I realized if I just step in faith into where God's calling me and what He's asking me to do, that it's not about what I can do, it's always about what He can do. And if you fast forward, about 4 years later, I was graduating in what we call high school, and it was an opportunity to go to college. And I grew up in a state called Illinois, and if you're familiar with the states, Illinois is kind of the central to east side of the United States. And my wife, we met in the 4th grade, so we'd have been about 10 years old when we met. And I knew instantly I was going to marry her. No, that's not true. I didn't know that at the time. But we did date each other for several years, and she was a year ahead of me in school. And so when she graduated, she decided that she was going to go to college in Oklahoma, which is a surprise to me because we didn't know anybody in Oklahoma, and it's about a 10-hour drive away from Illinois. And she broke up with me, and I found out that the reason why was that she actually was chasing after another guy to Oklahoma to college. True story. So what did I do? Chased after her, of course. And so that is how I ended up in Oklahoma. And actually, nobody's found that guy for the last 23 years. Have no idea where, that's a joke. I didn't do anything to hurt him, but I don't know where he's at, but I didn't do anything to hurt him. So, but I won, clearly, because I've been married just 2 days ago. Is my 22nd wedding anniversary. And we have been blessed with 4 children. They're ages 12, 10, 7, and 5. And it's girl, boy, girl, boy. My wife's an accountant, so the girls and boys have to balance out. That's just kind of how that works. Anyway, but that took me to Oklahoma. And when I came there to college, it was expected. I even expected that I was probably going to study religion. I went to a Christian university, and I was going to study religion because I had a Christian rap group, and I was probably going to become a youth pastor, and this was just kind of what was expected. However, when I got to college, when I got to university, I actually really felt like God was leading me to study business, particularly finance. And it was not a difficult decision because I knew that that's what God was leading me to do, but it was still a difficult decision because there were so many other people that were expecting that I was going to go into religion, and yet I felt distinctly like God was saying, no, business. And I didn't know why, but that's what I did. I stepped into that in faith, and I took a part-time job when I was in college, and the part-time job was at a car dealership that sold Honda. I don't know if that's a brand that's here in Malaysia, but Honda cars, and I worked in the back office, and all I did in the back office was some administrative work, and I was pretty bored because I would get done with my work early, and I started to listen into conversations that were happening in the back office. And one of those days I was listening, I probably shouldn't even been listening, but I was listening to the owner of the car dealership. He was listening to a presentation that some people were giving about building a website for the car dealership. This was back in 1995, and the group I overheard say that the price that they were going to charge to build a website was $2,200 US. Well, the owner walked out. I'd never talked to him before, but I felt like I was supposed to go up to him, and I would have been, 20 years old, maybe 19. And I went up to him and said, if you'll let me build a website for you, I'll do it for $100. And he just looked at me. He was like, okay. And so the only problem was I'd never built a website before. I did not know how to build a website. There were not books on how to build a website back in 1995. There were not even websites on how to build websites back in 1995. I had no idea what I was doing, but I figured it out, went and learned, talked to some people, did whatever I could to figure it out. I came back to him and showed him this website. He thought it was great. However, I said, I don't think you're going to sell cars in 1995 on the internet. I do think, however, that you might be able to sell auto parts. And so I proposed building a website to sell parts and accessories to cars. And so we started a website called HondaParts.com. And within a few months, I was working on this website. We launched it, and they started to sell hundreds of thousands of dollars in car parts through this website. And I was getting paid $6 an hour. But I was still happy, because I had a challenge and something to do. But one day the owner called me into his office, and I thought I was in trouble. I was going through in my mind, what did I say? What did I do? Why am I in trouble? Because I had no idea. And I sat down, and he looked at me. He said, what do you plan on doing in life? And I wasn't sure if it was a trick question. I just kind of stood there, and before I had a chance to answer, he said, whatever it is that you're going to do, I want to invest in it. And so I realized that this is sort of strange. I have an investor, and I don't even have an idea. This is kind of a backwards, thing. But I began to process, said, God, is this one of those moments where I thought I was going to go do investment banking, and this is one of those moments where instead there's this entrepreneurial opportunity, and is this what you're calling me to do? And I believe that it was, but yet once again, I remember thinking, but I've never started a business before. I don't know how to start a business. I still don't even know what the idea needs to be. And someone else could surely do this better, but because I knew that was God's direction, it wasn't about what I could do. It was about what he could do. And so in faith, again, I stepped into that and started what was then a web hosting company. That was the type of company it was. And back in 1996, when this started, there was probably only 20 web hosting companies, like that just did web hosting in the world. And we started this company, our first customers from Germany, and about a year and a half later, we had customers in 33 countries. And so it was growing rapidly, and we sold that company, started another company that was the largest professional wrestling website. Now, I know that if you're familiar with professional wrestling, this story is getting really interesting because I was a rapper, I worked at a car dealership, chased my wife, and now I have a professional wrestling website. If you're not familiar with professional wrestling, it's not very professional, and it's not wrestling. So it's basically people dressing up in costumes and pretending that they're wrestling, and people pay lots of money to go watch this. And it was very popular back then. And so we started this website and grew it and sold it in December of 1999 to a company that Goldman Sachs took public, or did an initial public offering on. And I went from where my wife and I were borrowing money to eat when we were in college to where we had more resource financially than we had ever anticipated ever being able to have in just like 3 years' time. And I began to think, this must be what God created me to do. I seem to feel like I have grace for this, and that He's graced me to start companies and sell them, and that must be what it is. And maybe I can just take those resources and have kingdom resource, and that's kind of what He designed me to do. And I started attending, while I still had that second company, I started attending a church called Life Church. My wife and I, we moved to another part of our city, and we wanted to get plugged into a church that we could really serve in, and we found this church called Life Church. Craig Groeschel is our senior pastor. The church was about 3 years old back then in 1999 when we started attending. We fell in love with the church, love with the spirit of the church, and just the life change that we could see happening. And so we got involved in a small group, and I began to play keyboard on the worship team as a volunteer. And I would play keyboard every weekend. We had Saturday services and Sunday services, and so I was there pretty much most of the day Saturday, most of the day Sunday, just serving, volunteering every weekend. Loved the church, loved serving. And we sold the company in December of 1999, and when we sold that company, the article came out in the newspaper, and my picture was on the front page of the paper. And one of the pastors at Life Church saw the article in the newspaper and said, "Isn't that the guy that plays keyboard on the worship team?" Because I never ever talked about what I did in business at church, and I never even thought and saw the two things even connected. But he wanted to go to lunch, and so I went to lunch, and at that lunch, he said, "Have you ever considered using the gifts that you have and the experiences that you have in business, have you ever considered using those on staff at the church?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Well, would you consider it?" And I said, "No." Because I loved my church, and I was afraid that if it became my job, that I might not love it anymore. I kind of liked it the way that it was, the way that I was serving. So I said, how about I just volunteer more in different ways? So that went from 10 hours a week to 20 hours a week to 30 hours a week. You can see where this is going, to 40 hours a week. And over the course of a year, I basically was spending all of my time serving the church in different ways as a volunteer. And the passion that I had for the local church just eclipsed the passion that I had for business. And I knew once again that God was calling me to something different than I had anticipated. Like, I was anticipating more entrepreneurial growth and more entrepreneurial ideas and to head that direction. But God had planned and designed for me to be on staff at the church. And yet again, I kind of felt like, man, I'm not qualified for this. I have no formal training. I have a finance degree. I didn't go to seminary. I could go down the list of all the things I'm not qualified to do. And yet God was just reminding me, it's not about what I could do. It was all about what He wanted to do. Not about my abilities, but about what He wanted to do through me. And so So I joined the staff of the church. August 1st, just a few days ago, was the 17th anniversary of me coming on staff at Life Church. And I had no idea what to expect. You know, my initial role had nothing to do actually with technology. I was involved in starting new locations because our church is a multi-site church. We're one church that meets in multiple locations, and we today have 31 locations in 10 different states. Back then, we had one location in one state in the United States, but the first 7, I was involved in starting those. That was kind of my job to kind of get them off the ground. It didn't have really anything to do with technology. And so in 2005 and 2006, about 5 years in on this journey, I kept processing, God, why did you take me through business and those experiences? I mean, surely it serves a purpose greater than just the finance or greater than getting my picture in the newspaper. Surely there's something, a greater purpose to those experiences. And I began to think about a few things that kind of frame the way I think today. And I want to share those with you because I think it really provides a foundation. And one of those is just this appreciation for how unique this time in history is that we're in. And what I mean by that is if you just look at a population graph, and I do think we might have this slide, maybe. There it is. If you look at the population graph, this is approximately for the last 2,000 years, you can see that something is happening on the right side of that graph, that it's not like any other time. Like God could have placed us all the way over here at 800 AD, but for whatever reason, he placed us over here on this side of this graph, and there's a space in time and history that you and I are occupying. And that space that we're occupying is approximately that space right there on the graph. So in the middle of that time that we're occupying, there are more people alive today than ever before in human history. And not only are there more people, but the growth of the population just is shooting straight up like a rocket during this space and time that we occupy. So what I'm trying to point to you is that the space, the place that we occupy in the timeline is unique. It's special. It's different. It's not like some other point in history. And at the same moment in time, we have tools and technologies that have the potential to knit this population together, to connect us to this population like never before in human history. Those two things are happening at the exact same time, the time that you and I occupy. Now, when we have a mission of seeing the gospel go to all the world, you could look at that and think those two things combined make for a huge opportunity. But when I see it, what I see is that God could have chosen to place us over here on the timeline or anywhere else, but he chose to place us over here, and that's not an accident. And if it's not an accident, it's for a purpose. And if it's for a purpose, it's not an opportunity, it's actually a responsibility. So I don't see it as a huge opportunity. I see it as a huge responsibility. I feel compelled to do anything I can in this space in history to reach this world with the gospel using whatever means, tool, or technology or thing that I can possibly do. So that's a framework that kind of guides the way that I think. And I begin to think about those experiences I had and started to come up with ideas and visions and dreams about what could be. So one of those, and there's several, but I'll just list a couple. One of those was inspired by the pro wrestling website, of all things. There were a community of people that were passionate about pro wrestling. And this website didn't just connect them to content about pro wrestling, it connected them to each other. And they would connect to each other and build relationships. And they would meet online and they would meet offline and they would have all of this relational activity that the website was helping to facilitate. And I thought, if that kind of passion could exist for pro wrestling, could we build a church community online? Could we have church online? And I don't mean streaming a message and content. I mean using technology to connect people to people, not just people to content or people to a message. And so we started something in 2006 called Church Online. And today, it's grown over time. Back then when we started it, I didn't know if it was legal or if it's allowed to happen, but I probably should have asked. We just went and did it. But slowly over time, we've managed to build that into a community where today there's about 250,000 unique computers every week that connect to one of 80 services that we have online. And they come from Pakistan and Indonesia and Bangladesh. And the United States is usually like third or fourth on the list of countries where people come from to participate in this online community. And it's reaching people in places where they can't go to church. And places they can but choose to come. But it's reaching many people in places where it would be illegal or a problem for them to actually gather publicly. And this was an example of using technology to connect with people and connect people to each other. A little bit later that same year, October of 2006, I was in the airport in Chicago. And I was in a long queue, one of those queues that just wraps back and forth, and then just when you think you're at the end of it, it turns the corner, and then you find out that there's a whole nother section that's going back and forth and back and forth. And so normally what would be a frustrating experience for me happened to be just a moment that God used to have me thinking about, I wonder if there's a way that I could use technology to help me connect with the Bible. Because I was a below average Bible reader. I wanted to be a great Bible reader, but I wasn't. And I could make excuses as for why, and that's really irrelevant. It doesn't really matter. The point was I wasn't, and I was trying to find out, I wonder if technology could help me connect with Scripture. And perhaps there's people like me, so maybe if we did this, it would actually be something that could help others as well. So there in the security line that day, this idea came for YouVersion. Now, many of you, if you're familiar with YouVersion, you know it as an app that's on your smartphone or tablet. It's a brown Holy Bible icon. I don't know if there's a picture of that, but in case for some reason you don't know what app I'm talking about, it looks like that, all right? So if you have that app on your phone, that's YouVersion. And if you want to know why it's called YouVersion, I'll save that story for later. It was just the best name I could come up with in the airport that day. That really had no other thinking to it. I know it makes no sense, and anyway, so that's okay. But the reason that most of you would know it as an app for your smartphone, what you wouldn't realize though is the actual idea for YouVersion that day in the airport was for a website. And the reason that you don't know that the original idea was for a website is because none of you went to that website when we launched it in 2007. It actually was a failure when we started. And when I had this idea, once again, I felt like, same thing. I've never built a Bible website before. I have no idea how to get the relationships that are needed, the publishers and the people that have the copyrights to different Bible texts in the different languages. I have no idea. I don't know any of these people. And I don't know how to do that. And surely there's somebody else that could do it better. But yet when God's leading me, when I know that He is, it's not about what I can do. It's always about what He can do. And so in faith, I stepped into it. But this time was a little different because those other stories I told you, even though you can tell the story, make it sound easy, it wasn't always easy. But in those other stories, we had pretty quick success with many of those things. This one wasn't like that because when we launched the website, like I said, it didn't work. I used the website only because we created it, but not because I naturally would use it. And we knew that it wasn't working, and we're not afraid to say that it was a failure because it was a failure. And God's taught us that sometimes it's through failure that we grow and that we learn. And so we embraced that failure, and we wanted to process why. Why did it fail? What could we learn from it? And one of the things we noticed was that we were using our BlackBerries all the time. This is early 2008, late 2007. And we were using our computers less and less. And I thought, what if we could design it to work on a BlackBerry? Now, I'm looking in this crowd, and I know that some of you might not have been born in 2008. So there was a device called a BlackBerry. It had a keyboard, and it had small screen on it. And and when I say small screen, it had like 3 or 4 lines of text. That's how small the screen was. And what happened, though, was profound in that it actually it actually worked. We redesigned the website to display on the BlackBerry, and very naturally, very consistently, we were engaging with the Bible, and we saw the traffic go up to this website from people using their BlackBerries to access it. And Apple announced that they were making it possible to develop apps for this new phone called the iPhone. And they were going to create something called an app store, something that we know today in our vocabulary, but back then was a whole new concept. And we thought, what if we could build a Bible app that could be that we could submit to the App Store? So I found a 19-year-old on our team who loved Apple, and that was actually the only requirement you had to have back then to build an app, was to find a 19-year-old that loved Apple, because no one knew how to build apps. And as a part-time project, we built a Bible app and submitted it to Apple. And on July 10th, 2008, so just a few weeks ago, was the 10th anniversary of the App Store launching, also known as the 10th anniversary of the Bible app launching, because the Bible app was among the first apps available the day that the App Store launched back in 2008. Now, we had no idea what to expect. We just didn't know. And that was a Thursday, and from Thursday night to Sunday morning, we saw 83,000 people install this on their iPhone. And they were opening it and using it and connecting. We could tell the data coming back of how many people were using it, engaging, and it just blew our minds. And so we like to move quickly when we see God move. And we felt like this was clearly something God had done, because we had no expectation for that. And so what was a part-time job for that 19-year-old on Friday became his full-time job on Monday when he came to work, because I was like, I don't know what you're working on, but stop working on it. This is what you need to work on now. And we've been on this 10-year sprint of going as fast as we can to try to get more languages and try to build more partnerships. And God's brought together a coalition of partners, including Alpha and several groups that have provided content and resources and Bible translations and distribution. And God's brought together this unity of partners. I even presented an iPhone with the Bible app on it to Pope Francis at the Vatican. And I tell people that I have the Pope's cell phone number. But it's because I gave him the cell phone, and that's the only reason I have the number. But I'm sure he doesn't use it. But I do have the number still. So, but I say that mainly just to point out that it's just been this wide range of relationships and partners that God's brought over the years, over these last 10 years, and we've seen those 83,000 devices grow to now over 333 million, 1/3 of a billion devices, growing by 4 to 5 million new devices every single month. And people are using it. Billions of minutes spent engaging in God's word. Here in Malaysia, the activity of the Bible app, people highlighting, bookmarking, loading chapters, has grown by 33% over the same period last year. We're seeing growth all over the world, and it's encouraging to see what God's doing, because when we started, we had no idea what he was going to do. But our faith has grown as we've seen God work. And again, we didn't know how to do these things, but it wasn't about what we could do. It was about what God could do when we simply stepped in faith. Now, it just so happens, and I know that, do I still have some time? We're doing okay? You guys okay if I talk a little bit longer? I'm not doing any more raps, don't worry. We had just yesterday, we launched a new app, and this is kind of rare for us, and so I thought I would just share it with you. We've had the Bible app. We have an app called the Bible app for kids, which is designed for really young children. It's an animated app, completely different app. And then yesterday, we launched a brand new app called Bible Lens. So I want to give you just a quick commercial and explain to you what Bible Lens is. First of all, it's completely free. There it is. There is actually a slide for this. So what Bible Lens is, it's an app that lets you take a photo, and then it will analyze what is in the photo, like what objects are in the photo, what background's in the photo, people are in the photo. And it will then take those objects, and it will match them to biblical concepts, and it will show you the best verses to go with that photo that you can then render on top of the image to share on social media. And so you can select from the ones it picks. It's available today, last night, but here's the bad news for you, because I know that several of you have Android phones looking at your cameras, is that it's available on iOS right now. However, it will be available on Android very soon, as in like, I'm going to just say 2 weeks and make our team figure it out. But it will be very soon, because we've been working on the Android app as well, and it didn't quite get finished in time for us to launch it together, but it will be soon. And so those of you that have an iPhone, you can brag to your friends that you have Bible Lens first, and you can take pictures of all your friends just to make them frustrated at you. And so, but our hope is that what this tool will do is basically help reframe the way you see the world around you and see it through the lens of Scripture. Because you can also, I didn't mention this, you can also link your camera roll to it so that it'll go back through the moments you've already taken and find the best verses to go with those pictures and photos. And so you could use your regular camera that you use. You don't have to use this camera. And as you take pictures each day, behind the scenes, in the background, it will be going through those pictures and then recommending pictures to you that you've already taken with Scripture on them to help you share that with your friends. And so we're excited about this. If you don't have it, and if you have an iPhone, go get it. Please tell people about it. We're trying to get to be number 1 in the App Store. We're number 7 before service here, but not that I'm looking or anything. I'm trying to figure out, at least in the U.S. App Store, we're 7th, and we're trying to push really hard to get it to be number 1, just because if you're not number 1, why am I talking about it? So I'm competitive. So I'm taking up way too much time, but I have to tell this story since I mentioned this. My daughter is 12, and I have a 12-year-old and 10-year-old, and we watched this show called Shark Tank. Do you get Shark Tank here? Okay, so we watched the show, and on the show one time, I'm going to tell the story really fast. There were 2 apps on one of the episodes, and I was curious, when you have 5 minutes to present your app in front of a big TV audience, and in the U.S., I think it's like 10 million people that watch this show, I said, I've got to believe that has a big impact on how many people download the app. That's like a really big commercial for your app. So right after the show aired, I went onto the App Store there in the U.S. to say, I wonder what happened and where it's ranked. And so I looked in the App Store, and one of the apps on the show wasn't even ranked. I couldn't even find it. The other app was ranked number 30 in its category, not in overall, but just in the category that it's in the App Store. And so I said, I wonder where the Bible app is right now. So I went and looked, and that time, the same time, we were not on Shark Tank, but our app, the Bible app, was ranked 35 overall, not in its category. Number 1 in its category, but 35 overall. So I show it to my daughter. She's 12. I say, look, Audrey, I said, this app, is 30th in its category, and I said, but the Bible app is actually number 35 overall. It's much higher, and it didn't have the national TV show. And she looks at me, and she's like, Dad, why are you showing that to me? I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you're proud of 35? Come back to me when it's number 1. I was like, you are so right. I beg your forgiveness. I'll never show that to you again. Anyway, sorry, I'm way off track here. I actually had a purpose in coming and talk to you besides giving you commercials and telling you stories about my daughter and apps. The purpose of why I came, though, is that I want these stories to inspire you, and I want you to recognize the pattern that I had in all those stories. In each of those stories, in each of those episodes of my life, I felt completely inadequate. I didn't know how to do something, but felt like God was calling me to it nonetheless. Because it was never about what I could do or what I knew. It was always about what God could do through me, and He just wanted me to be obedient and step into His calling for my life. And what I want to encourage you is that He has a calling and a purpose for each and every one of your lives. It's not an accident that you're here. He placed you on this earth with a purpose. He created you. And He has a role for you to play. And you may not see it fully. It may not be something that you know completely, and you may only know the next step, similar to me. I had my own ideas about what I thought it was going to be, but several times in my life, God redirected that, said, no, I know you thought that, but this is kind of what the next step is that I want you to take. And my job was just simply to discern what that was, to listen to his voice, which came through a relationship with him. That's how I was able to hear his voice. That's how I knew that it was him speaking to me. And so if you pursue him, it says in Ephesians 1:18 that the prayer is to open the eyes of our mind, open the eyes of our heart to his calling for our lives. And my prayer for you is that the eyes of your mind, your imagination is open to what God would have for you to do. But when you know that, and some of you already do know that. You already know what that next step is, that step of faith that he's calling you to. And maybe those voices have been inside of you saying you're inadequate, you're not good enough, you don't have what it takes, have been keeping you back from doing it. Because when you know that, my encouragement to you is to step into it in faith, knowing that God is capable and able and desires to do exceedingly and abundantly more than we could ever ask, think, or imagine. That's just how our God works. You can see it in the story of my life. I mean, in each of these steps, it was a step of faith that God did more than I ever thought was possible. And he didn't do it because of my skills. He did it because of his power at work within me. And so many times we might have a dream for our life. And my encouragement to you is if you want to have satisfaction and fulfillment in your life, it's not going to come through pursuing your dream. It's going to come through pursuing God's dream for your life. Because see, God's dream is so much bigger than your dream. It's bigger than anything you could dream. And what I want to encourage you is to seek him. I promise if you draw to him, seek him, he will give you that. He'll help you know. Your calling is going to be different than my calling. I wouldn't want you to have my calling because it's a weird, strange calling that I've had over the time. But it's going to be perfect because it's what God has purposed for you. And that's what's important. He's going to bless you when you're following your calling, not when you're trying to pursue or follow someone else's calling or what someone else thinks your calling should be, but when you're following what he would have for you to do. And so that's my prayer for you. That's what I hope you hear through this story. I hope you don't hear a story about my success because it's not my success. Everything that I share with you today is all completely about how God did something incredible, not how I did something incredible. I know that for a fact because I know what I'm capable of, and it's very, very little. Most people say, Bobby, I think that did you ever see any of this coming? Did you ever see what God was going to do? And I was like, no, and I'm so grateful I didn't, because had I would have messed it all up if I would have known what the destination was going to be for these things. I just needed God to reveal himself to me step by step. And so you must have had a really big faith to take those steps. And the truth was I didn't really have big faith. I had just a little bit of faith. But the Bible says that if we have faith just the size of a mustard seed, small amount of faith, that he can move a mountain. And all I had to do was have the faith to start. I didn't even have to have the faith to finish, just the faith to start. And God used that step of faith, and he did more than I ever thought was possible. So I stepped in faith to come and preach 4 times today, or talk 4 times today, in faith that God was going to take this story and the story of what he's done and use it in a way that connects to you. Use it in a way that helps you perhaps pursue and discover his calling for your life. But more importantly than just understanding it is to step into it with faith and realize that he's going to do so much more than you could ever ask, think, or imagine. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I thank you for each and every single person here. I thank you that we are not here by accident. I thank you that you've given each of us a purpose, a part that we play, a role that we play, Father, that you've given us unique talents and abilities, but it's not actually up to our own talents and abilities, that your calling is more about what you can do and you will do through us if we just completely surrender our lives to you. I am grateful that you give us the opportunity to be used by you. And I pray right now that you'll open the eyes of the minds of every person here, that you'll give them innovative ideas. You'll give them an imagination to dream, and not dream their dreams, but to see your dream for them, and to realize that your dream is so much bigger than their dream. And that when they understand it, when they are close to you and hear your voice, that you will give them the courage and the faith to take a step and know that you stand ready to do exceedingly and abundantly more than we could ever ask, think, or imagine. And we give you the glory in advance for what you're going to do. We don't want any of it, Father, because it's all completely for you. And we give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen.